Charlie, what do you have for us this week?
I've got something a little different than that. I was looking at an article that was just a more general thing that's happening, which is that Dean Foods is going to potentially sell to the Dairy Farmers of America. And of course, that means nothing to anyone until I explain it, which is that this is the largest milk producer in the U.S. and basically they've been losing money in the last 8 to 10 quarters. They've been declining revenue in the last 7 of 10. They've got almost $1 billion in what they call debtor in possession financing. Now, for those who don't know, this is fancy talk for payables, which have been rendered and are owed, but no one has the money to pay. And so we're going to try to formalize that with some kind of agreement so that it doesn't just look like a stale payable. And it's almost $1 billion, so I found that to be kind of funny. They're doing Chapter 11 reorganization, and they're going to continue operating while it reorganizes, which is another kind of an interesting thing to have to go through. They had mentioned in the article that milk sales had been declining since the 70s, which just got me thinking about, okay, so known problem there. You know that your sales are declining. How, in general, does a business, what kind of possible actions might a business take to try to adjust to what they know is going to be a downward stream of revenue? How can they sort of optimize and know that that's going to happen and still find a way to remain profitable? I know there are a lot of different strategies to this, but I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that as a general question.
Yeah, and it's kind of, the phrase that comes to mind is managing the decline, which is my younger brother threw that phrase at me when I turned 40. And I was like, it's like the rest of your life is about managing the decline, right? And
it's a rough 40-year-old wisdom to lay on you.
So I think...
So basically, we're all going bankrupt in dairies, and we need to manage this.
Yeah. It's just like, you don't, just because things are declining towards an inevitable end, you don't just throw in the towel, right? There's still good stuff yet to happen, and I think that applies in the business context too, right? So
I'm glad that was the message. I was worried there.
Well, that's how I choose to see it.
Perfect.
Yeah. This is all a metaphor.
Yes.
The milk company's not going bankrupt. This is all just a metaphor.
Yeah, but I think, I think your choices. I think the idea of being a business that's in decline is, or where the overall trend is downward in terms of sales over a long period of time, there's not that many businesses that discuss that topic. It is very analogous to old age, right? Because there's not a lot of businesses that discuss that topic in our environment, right? What you hear people talk about from a business standpoint is entrepreneurialism and being a new business and growing and this kind of ever expanding market share that you're trying to grab. And so, the idea that, we're managing an asset that exists and will continue to exist for a long period of time. But it is the amount of cash flow that comes from that asset is known to be something that will go down. And I think what the gut in me, because I work a lot in the entrepreneurial community, my gut reaction to that at first is probably not the right reaction, because my gut reaction is, why aren't you pivoting? Why aren't you figuring out what is the next thing that you can get into to prevent this from happening? And then I think, but that's tackling that issue from a very kind of young, specific way of looking at it, as opposed to saying, yeah, but you're talking about something that actually makes money and is very profitable to begin with. And so it may be declining, but it's still making money and being profitable. There's no reason to ditch it and just move away to something else, right? So I guess you kind of look at your other alternatives. That would be one alternative, is reinvigorate the company, become more entrepreneurial, and find kind of what that new horizon would be. I'd throw that out there. That would be one possible alternative.
And that was what I thought when I first heard it, go to small batch milk or, all grass fed or something. People pay lots of money around here for that kind of stuff. But sorry.
Yeah, well, sitting here in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but there is, I think we laugh about it being Portland, Oregon, but organic milk or kale, as popular as it is in Portland, Oregon, it does have appeal across the country as well too.
Sure.
So it isn't uniquely a Portland thing, but I guess if you're starting to look for other alternatives, you say, no, that's that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to pivot into some new business. We want to manage this asset well as we go forward. Then I think, it is, we can get into the so-called obvious things, right? In terms of, okay, then let's model it out. Let's forecast what this looks like. I mean, how much cash flow do we believe we will generate from this business with a declining curve, and for how many years, and what's that time horizon, and overall, what is that going to look like? And I think there's still value to be extracted there, even while it's on the decline. I think that's the thing that's counterintuitive to someone like me, who is very focused in the entrepreneurial side of things and on growth. I mean, in our business, we say we work with growth-oriented companies. So I can intellectually think about this possibility, but it's not. It's still a little bit. It still feels a little bit awkward to me.
Yeah.
To think about. Oh yeah, how do you manage? How do you look at that process and extract value? And I guess that's my point is, even though it feels awkward to me, it is actually, when I think about it academically, it is still true. There's still value to be extracted from businesses or assets that are declining in value over time, or declining in their market share over time.
And I would say probably the same strategy that I would, the same advice I would give to a growing company, I would probably give to like a declining company, and that is to scale slowly. And that means scale up slowly and scale down slowly.
Yeah.
And I think in the case of these guys, and I've been in a failing business before, I've witnessed that. The mindset inside the business most of the time is like, it's gonna turn around. These guys that have guys have been in the trenches for so long, that company's really old, that we've always made it before, we'll make it again, kind of, I just got to make a few more sales, this thing will turn around, we'll reduce our debt, or there's always it seems to be an answer,
A hope,
a hope out there. When I think probably they're missing the fact, and I think growth business, entrepreneurs and growth businesses kind of miss this when they want to grow too fast. And I think declining revenue sales in a declining business, or a dying business, or the end of a life cycle of that business, you're right, there's still value there. The problem is they see the value it once had and aren't willing to accept the new value that it does have.
Yeah.
And so they continue to try and operate at a level that's unsustainable, obviously. And then, what you need to do is you need to start tapering and scaling down.
That's the key. I think how you scale down is the key to how you deal with the declining revenue, is just basically trying to put in as many pieces in place so that scale just happens naturally. Whether that's by negotiating things as percentages of sales so that it just naturally adjusts, or whether that's by reducing overheads proactively, knowing that some decline will happen soon. Those sorts of things seem like reasonable reactions a business might take. It's so much harder when the factor is external, because of course in this case, in a small business, it's almost always internal. It's like, why are sales declining? Because we're not doing it right. In the large scheme of like why America drinks less milk from the 70s till now, that changes the discussion quite a bit.
There's externalities there. Yeah.
The two guys in a room aren't going to figure out how to get the world to drink more milk.
Sure.
Right.
But I also think, we look at this very clinically from like a numbers and kind of dollars and cents perspective. But I think the other part that makes this difficult is, as a business owner being that old, being around for that long, it's not just a dollars and cents kind of question. It's also like a human capital.
Very true.
People have spent their lives working for you.
Yeah.
You feel a responsibility to those people. And a lot of business owners feel that way. And making that scale down and having to cut people back and to even be profitable still is a very hard step to take.
Yeah, and the need for just the fact of what they're doing is nutritional in nature, and so people get invested in it too. Sure. Because they're it's a healthy thing. It's not this questionable business they're in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things you guys have said that I want to pick up on. Like, I mean, I hadn't thought about that before, but managing the scale down so that you're not doing it too quickly, for one thing. Like being ready to scale down, and Charlie, you mentioned, if it's possible that your vendors or counterparties can be negotiated on a basis of a percentage of sales, so that as your sales decline, your work with those parties also decline. But even if you can't get contractual relationships set up exactly that way, it reminds me that when we're modeling in that scenario, we can at least set the budgets that way, right? Sure. And then renegotiate contracts as needed to get them to fall in line with that. And I think that managing the decline, I think what comes to our mind is, oh crap, sales are declining, so we need to make cuts. But then the other side of it is not cutting too quickly, because you end up leaving value on the table. And I suspect that does happen in some cases where people kind of rush away from something. They see that and they're like, okay, I'm out of this business. I'm out of this industry. And there was still value to be extracted there. And so by basically declining too quickly, just like you can scale up too fast, scaling down too quickly, you actually cut yourself off from being able to extract the value that's still there. You no longer have the capacity to do it, and you lose what remaining value is there, I think is a real possibility in some of these cases. And I think that goes into what you were talking about, people's lives and the entrepreneurs and the owners of companies being invested in their team and their workforce who's been with the company for a long time. Putting myself in that owner's shoes, I think about, well, it's hard to co-opt the team on this point, because you know, ideally you would be able to just give everyone lots of warning and just say, hey, this is what's happening, folks. So, you know, you're not going to lose your job tomorrow, but we're going to have fewer people in this business, you know, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now than we do today. So we need to figure that out together. I think an owner and entrepreneur would always love to be able to say that. But the problem then, of course, is, well, do you have a culture and a team that's not going to turn around and once you say that, they're gone the next day, right? Sure. Yeah. And that's, I think that's what most operators would be afraid of, right? And so then you end up in this kind of unfortunate situation where people quit communicating and they're not talking openly and transparently about what's going on in the business, because, you know, probably that team who has experience kind of knows this about the industry as well, right? They know what's kind of going on. The owner kind of knows what's going on, but nobody wants to have that conversation because what they're afraid it might trigger, right? So I think that those are definitely some dynamics that you have to wrestle with if you're managing that that kind of environment.
Well, and I think it goes back to the fact, you know, like if you manage just with this or just with this, or if you just manage with your head, just your head or just your heart, so either just numbers or just from like a human perspective, like you can be skewed. It has to be like a mix of that, right? You have to kind of quantify and qualify those decisions based on not only numbers, but the human element and the human cost behind it as well.
Yeah. Very true, because you're a business, but at the end of the day, you are working with people.
Sure.
That's all it is.
Sure.
With regard to the people issue, I think you're fortunate if you're in an industry or in an environment where attrition is naturally just part of the game, right? Because then it's not, you know, and you see this with government agencies, for example, is that they often budgets will start being cut, or they'll know that their budget is not as big, and they don't run to first just lay people off. What they often do, you know, like the IRS, for example, that we have some familiarity with, what they would often do is they would just stop hiring. Right. Because they know that there's a certain attrition that goes on anyway. And so if they're looking at a long range plan based on their budgets, what they have available for their workforce and for their team, they know that their team will get right sized by just not bringing on new people over a certain number of years. So if you have enough runway and you're in a organization or an industry where that can work for you, that's somewhat fortunate, right? Because then you don't have to necessarily lose anybody that doesn't want to be lost, right? Yeah. on the team of it, yeah.
But then talking about the long runway, it gives then people time to kind of decide.
Yeah.
This is the new normal. Do I want to stay here, or do I want to maybe start looking somewhere else?
Yeah, that's the hard thing, is having that, you know.
But it doesn't sound like they have much of a runway if they already have.
Debtor in possession financing.
Yeah.
Not a good sign.
No.
Yeah, and I think the other alternative, if you're a business operator and your business has hit maturity and now there's externalities that are causing your business model to decline. I mean, we see this in the accounting industry. The business model that I would say is declining, I'm not the only one who said it, and I think is tax preparation and specifically the individualized service, particularly we see that with 1040 individual tax preparation. I think a lot of my colleagues would say, yeah, that's true. I think a lot of my CPA colleagues would maybe not totally accept the idea that that I think is true, which is this is actually coming for business tax preparation as well. That the entire compliance function is a declining industry, and so we do see it in something like that that's a little bit closer to home with that, and I think the other alternative, of course, which is kind of similar to saying pivot, is selling, right? Selling, getting out of the, you do cut and run to some extent, right? You do, you sell it off, and it's not, and cutting and running puts a negative connotation on it, right? It may ultimately, if market forces are working well, the whoever you're selling to is probably just somebody who's who also understands that industry or that business is in the decline, but that they're in the mode and ready to manage the decline. That is what they do, right? And so I think probably you have to do some soul searching as an entrepreneur or as an operator of a company. If you're in a mature industry and it's starting in the decline, I think that would be the soul searching you'd have to do is, okay, is that who I want to be? Do I want to be the person and the kind of business that figures out that challenge of extracting value from assets that are in decline like this, or do I want to sell this and go work in something else that is on the uptick kind of thing, right? So, and that's having self-awareness to know what do you like doing, what are you good at, where are your skills. I think the thing about that industry, though, when we're talking about that, is that anybody who's operating in it today, it's not like a sudden light switched on. It didn't just suddenly decline, right? So I suspect that the operators of that business are already past this. They've already decided who they are and what they want to be to some extent, right? They're not growth entrepreneurs who suddenly found themselves in the milk industry and we're like, oh, this isn't a growth industry. What do I do? Right. That it didn't happen that way. Right.
Yeah.
They chose to be in an industry already that wasn't really a major growth industry probably. And so this isn't that much of a surprise to them. But I think we'll see that probably another industry that we talk about here and that we play in sometimes is the cannabis industry. We'll see it go through that. I don't know if we'll see it in our own careers or lifetimes, but it will go through that phase where it's no longer kind of this high growth entrepreneurial industry. It's more of a mature industry, and the operators who are in those businesses will have to make that choice of, abstractly who are they and what do they enjoy doing, being a growth leader, or do they want to transition into being a manager and administrator of a mature organization?
Or I could even see like the paper industry being in a similar situation as the milk industry, right? Think about the booming industry that was paper, newspapers, magazines, everything was mail order, paper catalogs. If you were in the printing business, that was the way people consume media.
Right.
And now, if you're in the paper business, I'm sorry, but that's not, that's just, I would be surprised if it's like 75%, down from what it was.
And it's still there. I mean, what you're like, you look at media, there's still magazines out there that still sell ads, but certainly they've declined substantially from where they were 10, 20 years ago for sure. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Very true.
Well, that was a great article, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting things to talk on.
Such a core
thing.
About
on that.
Milk.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't beat it.
Right. And by the way, I love milk.
Yeah. It does the body good.
I was a milk boy from a long time, as a kid. Cereal in the morning, milk and cookies.
Yeah, I know. I've never actually, I'm neutral on milk. I put it in my coffee. I mean, I can drink it. I'm not against it, but it's not a go-to. I don't think of it as, I need my milk today. But I've known so many people that are like I need my milk, or maybe it's triggered by certain things. Like I have one guy that works with me that he loves his donuts, and I buy him a box of donuts or something, and when I get him the box of donuts, he's like, "Don't forget the carton of milk." Like he's gonna
It is a very complimentary beverage. It goes well with
when I bake a lot, you know what I mean, and or cook a lot, and like milk. If you're making a gravy, milk, You know, that's usually like a secret weapon. You know, like in my turkey gravy, like here with a little cream at the end.
Yeah.
Eggs
Yeah.
too.
You
Make an
know,
egg, scrambled
yep.
eggs, put
Scrambled
some
eggs,
milk in there.
it's
makes it
moisture, it's a
creamier.
little fat, so it makes the eggs creamier.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but you know, and it's not like I don't even, to be honest, I have half and half at home. I don't keep whole milk in the house anymore unless I'm cooking. But
Sure.
I did used to drink it on a regular basis. You
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah.
I drink less of it now just because somebody told me it's not good for you or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
I've met people who claim to at least drink cereal with water, and I don't talk to those people
Ooh,
anymore.
Wow.
yeah.
No.
So-
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Well, too weird.
that's a little
Yeah.
too weird even for Portland.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, yeah. In Portland, you got to do almond milk, right?
Yeah,
Or,
exactly.
Or like
Silk.
soy milk.
or soy
Yeah.
milk.
I heard
or-
that oat milk is really good.
Oh yeah, that's the latest.
Oat
Oat
milk
milk.
is
Yeah,
the new
my
thing,
wife
right?
is all into
creamy,
that. Yeah.
right? It's supposed to be creamy
Yeah.
like milk.
Never had it.
I don't
know.
know. The flavor was okay. I liked it
Yeah.
okay, but yeah.
It's not the same as whole milk. I mean,
Yeah, I'm just yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I can't get behind the nut milks only because when you drink it in coffee, it just now it just tastes like nuts and water. Like it's not, it's not like
Yeah.
it doesn't have that creaminess, you know, and the silky. I don't know. Sorry. Anyway.